Bernie Sanders. So now, I'm sure this is the question you get most often by far, but people will say, well, Bernie Sanders is incredibly progressive, so why do we need the Green Party when we have a real progressive in the race?
Because unfortunately, the Democratic Party has this thing called a kill switch, which they created after a peace candidate, George McGovern, won the nomination back in 1972. Mm-hmm. And the Democratic Party didn't want that to happen again. So they changed a few things around. One is that they have these things called Super Tuesday, which you need a whole lot of corporate money in order to survive, run simultaneously TV ads all over the place. And then you have the super delegates, which basically allow party insiders to control the margin of error and the unpredictability in the actual nominating convention. And Hillary and Bill are very busy scooping up those delegates, which control about 20% of the vote. And
so, but that's the argument
that's
they
their
used
guarantee.
to say that Obama couldn't beat Hillary Clinton, but he did.
Well,
So,
he beat Hillary Clinton because he had the banks behind him. I don't think Bernie's going to get that. Bernie is not going to get that kind of corporate money because he's not going to sell his soul the way that Barack Obama did. So he's very unlikely.
do you think Barack Obama was a corporate candidate?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I mean, look what he did when he came to office, you know. The first thing he did was bail out Wall Street, you know, when the public was demanding otherwise and his base was demanding otherwise, you know, he showed who his true masters are. So, you know, I don't think Bernie's going to do that. Bernie doesn't have the money. I don't think he's going to have the money.
Well, he's got 44 million. That was the number he raised.
Right, and Hillary's
recently.
going for $2 billion, you know, so
Yeah.
she's well out ahead, and you know that the party is already, you know, pushing back on him in a very big way. You know, and you can look at how their debates get staged and the kinds of questions that get asked and so on. You know, he's being made to look like maybe he's bidding for the vice presidential position or something. Mm-hmm. I wish him all the power in the world, but he's not the first candidate with integrity to challenge inside the Democratic Party. You can look at Dennis Kucinich, who basically got wiped out from the debates, and then he got redistricted by the party. You could look at, you know, Al Sharpton or Howard Dean, and the Dean scream. Because then the DNC, you know, if they don't like what you're doing, they will run a PR campaign against you. And they did it with the Dean scream. They wiped him out when he looked like he was going to be a threat, with some, you know, absolutely outrageous campaign that had nothing to do with him, or Jesse Jackson, who got wiped out for being, you know, an anti-Semite because he wasn't pro-Israel enough. You know, that was a completely concocted campaign because he was a threat to the game plan of the DNC. So the DNC is not going to turn around and love Bernie. In spite of however, you know, fabulous he may be doing, he's going to be pushed back against. So he's very unlikely. He's not the first great Democratic candidate to raise these issues. And while these rebels make a valiant stand inside the Democratic Party, the party keeps marching to the right over the decades. So I think it's really important to look at the larger game plan here and whether retrenching from independent politics and crawling back into the party and preventing a real base from building. You know, it's not like my chances are so great. I'm not holding my breath. I'm not ruling it out either. But what I can do outside of the Democratic Party is build. And we can put our feet down and we can grow. And if you look at, for example, Syriza, not that Syriza is a perfect example, and it's not as though
in Greece. Yep.
It's not a done deal in Greece. It's still, you know, a crazy, moving, dynamic picture. But they had to get to 1%, then they had to get to 3%, then they had to get to 7%, and then a few elections later, they were suddenly a plurality. You've got to be able to grow. And inside the Democratic Party, you basically get destroyed. You raise really important issues, but then it goes up in a puff of smoke, and those resources get dumped back into the party, which Bernie has already said he will do.
If you're playing realpolitik, you've got to be rooting against Bernie Sanders winning the Democratic primary so that you could be a real alternative to Hillary Clinton and the Republicans.
I am agnostic on the Democratic Party, and I have a lot of respect for Bernie's struggle. And I wish him all the best in the world. We're using two different strategies around a similar domestic agenda. We have different foreign policy agendas. Not only like how to deal with ISIS, and it's not go get them, Saudi Arabia. It's shutting down, the weapons profiteering that's created such a mess here, and the military-industrial complex, et cetera. So we have different views on that, different views on Palestine. And
What is your view on Palestine?
That, our foreign policy, including with Israel, including with Egypt and Saudi Arabia, should be guided by international law and human rights. And Israel has been a flagrant violator of human rights and international law through the occupations, through the slaughter, and the war crimes committed against Gaza. So we should not be in the business of funding the Netanyahu government to the tune of $8 million a day, and now they're talking about making it even more. So Bernie and I differ there.
Why? What do you think Bernie Sanders' position on that is?
Well, he's kind of no questions asked about Israel, and that we need to stand strong for Israel, and Israel has a right to defend itself. I think that's not a defensible policy given the human rights and international law violations being conducted by the Netanyahu government.
So, of course, the mainstream would answer back to you. Of course, Israel has a right to defend itself. How could you argue against that? So what do you want to do? You want to just get out of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, then the Palestinians will attack Israel? You're being naive. How would you answer that?
Well, it's against international law to be an occupying force to start with, and it's against international law to enforce collective punishment. So, it's entire regions that are being slaughtered here. So, there's, yes, human rights abuses should be stopped on all sides, and they are occurring on all sides. But Israel's so massively dwarfs the abuses and the murders, et cetera, going on from the part of the Palestinians that there's nothing comparable going on here. And, the U.S. has not been an honest broker in trying to help create a peace process. We've been sort of locked into the Israeli process here, which has not been a process at all.
So, I keep coming back to the same thing, which is not surprising, which is how do you break through? Because if you say that on TV, the Chuck Todds of the world, et cetera, will, in their minds at least, disqualify you immediately. They'll say, oh, that's an unacceptable position. How could you say that Israel is oppressing the Palestinians more, committing more acts of violence than the Palestinians are? That's not an acceptable position to have.
Well, you can have your opinions, but you can't have your own facts, And the Israelis have killed many, many thousands of Gazans in the last couple of wars, while it's something like 100 Israelis, mostly soldiers, who've died. The deaths are just staggeringly, unequal. So it's not like there's two parties that are fighting.
You know what they say to that, which is, look, they're hiding in the cities and they're using their civilians as shields.
That's fine, they can say that. They will say what they will say, They're not the deciders here, and the American people deserve to hear the other side of the story, which people find increasingly compelling. And, the facts are very much on the side of the human rights here, which are being massively abused on the part of the Palestinians. And, the Israelis are terrified too. We need an even hand to bring them together. But let me tell you, no one is doing this more effectively than the human rights groups on the ground between Israelis and Palestinians. They are the ones who need to be lifted up here. They are the ones who are capable of engendering trust and confidence to be able to move forward and calm the nerves on both sides and have a truce on both sides. Things have been so hopeless from the point of view of the occupied, starved, decimated, and murdered Palestinians. Things have been so hopeless that it's no wonder that these intifadas keep breaking out every couple of years. It's no surprise. So there needs to be some hand of justice here that is moving things forward. And because Israelis and Palestinians have already been able to solve this on the ground where they are working together, this is a situation that can be fixed. But we need to start standing up on the side of human rights and international law.
So let's get, okay, see, if you have an opportunity and you can explain it, you might win that argument.
You're not kidding. I mean,
Right.
which is why this all
And
comes back
it's
to forcing our way into this conversation.
But it won't be easy. I mean, obviously, there'll be enormous shouting back, how dare you, et cetera. And we know how that works. So let's get back to domestic politics.